brought to you by WikiVD Documentaries. The Devil Wears Prada film.
The Devil Wears Prada is a 2006 American comedy drama film based on Lauren Weisberger's 2003 novel of the same name. This screen adaptation stars Meryl Streep as Miranda Priestly, a powerful fashion magazine editor, and Anne Hathaway as Andrea Sachs, a college graduate who goes to New York City and lands a job as Priestley's co-assistant. Emily Blunt and Stanley Tucci co-star as co-assistant Emily Charlton and art director Nigel, respectively.
Adrian Grenier, Simon Baker, and Tracie Thoms play key supporting roles. Wendy Finerman produced, and David Frankel directed the film, which was distributed by 20th Century Fox. Streep's performance drew critical acclaim and earned her many award nominations, including her record-setting 14th Oscar bid, as well as the Golden Globe for Best Actress in a Comedy or Musical. Blunt also drew favorable reviews and nominations for her performance, as did many of those involved in the film's production.
The film was well received by both film critics and the public, and became a surprise summer box office hit following its June 30 North American release. The commercial success and critical praise for Streep's performance continued in foreign markets, with the film leading the international box office for most of October. Likewise, the U.S.
DVD release was the top rental during December. The film finished in 2006's top 20 both in the U.S. and overseas and grossed over $300 million, mostly from its international run. Although the movie is set in the fashion world, most designers and other fashion notables avoided appearing as themselves for fear of displeasing U.S.
Vogue editor Anna Wintour, who is widely believed to have been the inspiration for Priestley. Still, many allowed their clothes and accessories to be used in the film, making it one of the most expensively costumed films in history. Wintour later overcame her initial skepticism, saying she liked the film and Streep in particular. Production. Director David Frankel and producer Wendy Finerman had originally read The Devil Wears Prada in book proposal form. It would be Frankel's second theatrical feature, and his first in over a decade. He, cinematographer Florian Bauhaus and costume designer Patricia Field drew heavily on their experience in making Sex and the City.
Frankel recalls the whole experience as having high stakes for those involved, since for himself and the others behind the camera it was the biggest project they had yet attempted. With barely adequate resources, we knew we were on very thin ice, he told Variety. For a 2016 article on the film's 10th anniversary,
it was possible this could be the end of the road for us. Writing. Work on a screenplay started promptly, before Weisberger had even finished her work. When it became a bestseller upon publication, elements of the plot were incorporated into the screenplay in progress. Most took their inspiration from the 2000 Ben Stiller film Zoolander and primarily satirized the fashion industry.
But it was still not ready to film. Elizabeth Gabler, later head of production at Fox, noted that the finished novel did not have a strong narrative. Since there wasn't a strong third act in the book, she said later, we needed to invent that. In the meantime, the studio and producer Wendy Finerman sought a director. Out of many candidates with experience in comedy, David Frankel was hired despite his limited experience, having only made one feature, Miami Rhapsody, along with some episodes of Sex and the City and Entourage. He was unsure about the property, calling it undirectable, a satire rather
and a love story. Later, he cited Unzipped, the 1995 documentary about designer Isaac Mizrahi, as his model for the film's attitude towards fashion. It revels in some of the silliness of the fashion world, but is also very serious.
At a meeting with Finerman, Frankel told her that he thought the story unnecessarily punished Miranda. "My view was that we should be grateful for excellence. Why do the excellent people have to be nice?" He prepared to move on and consider more scripts.
2 days later, his manager persuaded him to reconsider and look for something he liked that he could shape the film into. He took the job, giving Finerman extensive notes on the script and laying out a detailed vision for the film. 4 screenwriters worked on the property. Peter Hedges wrote the first draft, but didn't think he could do more. Another writer passed.
Paul Rudnick did some work on Miranda's scenes, followed by a Don Roos rewrite. After that, Aileen Brosh McKenna, who was able to relate her own youthful experiences attempting to launch a journalism career in New York to the story, produced a draft after a month's work that struck the right balance for Finerman and Frankel, whose notes were incorporated into a final version, rearranging the plot significantly, following the book less closely and focusing the story on the conflict between Andrea and Miranda.
She found the experience of writing a story with female protagonists that did not center around a relationship very liberating. "I felt I was allowed to do what the movie wanted to be, a Faust story, a Wall Street for ladies." McKenna also initially toned down Miranda's meanness at the request of Finerman and Frankel, only to restore it later for Streep. She later cited Don Rickles as her main influence for the insults in the dialogue. Before even starting work on the screenplay, she had come up with Miranda's "take a chance, hire the smart fat girl" line, which she felt summed up the disparity between Andy and the world she found herself in. McKenna consulted with acquaintances who worked in fashion to make her screenplay more realistic. In a 2010 British Academy of Film and Television Arts lecture, she told of a scene that was changed after one of these reviews, where Nigel told Andy not to complain so much about her job. Originally, she had made his speech more of a supportive pep talk. However, one of those acquaintances said that would not happen, and 01 in that world is nice to each other. There's no reason to be, and they don't have time. She quoted him as saying, "Cerulean sweater speech." The cerulean speech, where Miranda draws the connection between the designer fashion in Runway's pages and Andy's cerulean sweater, criticizing Andy's snobbishness about fashion and explaining the trickle-down effect, had its origins in a scene cut from earlier drafts that Streep had asked to have restored. It slowly grew from a few lines where the editor disparaged her assistant's fashion sense to a speech about why she thought fashion was important. "She is so aware that she is affecting billions of people, and what they pick off the floor, and what they are putting on their bodies in the morning." Streep said in 2016 she was interested in the responsibility lying on the shoulders of a woman who was the head of a global brand. That scene wasn't about the fun of fashion, it was about marketing and business. McKenna recalls that she kept expanding it to suit Streep and Frankel. But even a few days before it was scheduled to be filmed, she was unsure if it would be used or even shot. She was revising it at a nearby Starbucks when she realized that Miranda would describe something not as just blue, chosen as the color for Andy's sweater since it would work best on screen, but would instead use an exact shade from a list she sent of shades. Streep picked cerulean. The final speech takes up almost a page of the script, long for a mainstream film. "I was like, it'd be cool if half of it ended up in the movie," the writer says. "Every word is in the movie. The references
to past designer collections are entirely fictional, McKenna explains, since the speech was written around the sweater's color.
The speech has become one of the film's most memorable moments. Miranda's signature monologue, to the ringer, Cerulean, has never sounded more sinister. The Huffington Post wrote in 2016, Liz Jones, former editor of British Marie Claire, said it was a rare glimpse at the way in which even the most outlandish and extreme exponents of fashion influence and enrich all our lives, even if we only ever shop at Marks & Spencer or Gap.
Thank you for watching. Brought to you by WikiVD Documentaries. Please like and subscribe below. Please like and subscribe below.